What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Just When You Thought They Were Out, They Have Pulled Themselves Back In. As always, I am your host, Zach Cronin, and today we're going to be talking about the Golden State Warriors because the Warriors are, once again, one of the best teams in basketball. At the time of this recording, they are 9-2 in a three-way tie for first in the Western Conference. Fucking hair, dude, what? With Oklahoma City and Phoenix. I'll admit, I did not expect Golden State to come out this strong right out of the gate. I did not expect for them to be anywhere near the top of the Western Conference, let alone a championship contender, as to what they look like today. Perhaps I was naive in that regard, but after the last couple of seasons for the Warriors, I don't think it was that much of a stretch to think that they would just be a middle of the pack playoff team. But that is clearly not the case. There is one area of the floor in particular that makes the Warriors as good as they were in the past, and it is their defense. If you go through all of their championship runs, they have always been one of the most elite defensive teams in the NBA, and they have returned to that form once again. Last year, this team was 18th in points per game allowed and 15th in defensive efficiency. This year, they are the 8th best team in points per game allowed and the 5th best team in terms of defensive efficiency. Even if you go back to 2022 when they beat the Celtics, the Warriors' offense wasn't really that spectacular. They benefited from timely offense where instead of just bombarding you with like 25, 28, 30-point quarters, they would score when they most needed it. And they kept themselves in games by having the best defense in the NBA. That is the same equation, the same recipe, the same formula as to what is happening this season, except the Golden State's offense is now once again back to being arguably the best in the NBA as they are second in both points scored per game and offensive efficiency. Of course, if we're going to start with the offense, it begins with none other than Steph Curry. Yes, his per game averages are down, but per 36, this guy is averaging 30 points per game. The only reason his per game production has been reduced is because there's been a reduction in minutes. He's at about 29 per game, but still shooting 48% from the field, 43% from three. The offense is going to go as long as Steph is there and as long as Steph is healthy. That much is a given. But the acquisition of Buddy Hield has really amped up this offense back to prime Klay Thompson levels, prime Splash Brothers levels, because this guy is averaging 8.2 threes attempted per game, and he's converting at basically a 47% clip. One of the most efficient and voluminous three-point shooters of the last couple of years is finally being utilized properly and is in a system whose main ideology is to generate open perimeter looks. We also can talk about Jonathan Kuminga. Andrew Wiggins looks like he settled back into the role that he had a few years ago. Overall, this offense is humming along quite respectably and quite efficiently. I mean, there's really no reason for me to believe that they're not going to maintain this level of potency for the remainder of the season. But I really do want to talk about their defense because, as I mentioned already, that's the reason they are this good. There are multiple reasons as to why the Warriors have returned to being dominant on defense. They, of course, retained Draymond Green, who is one of the best defenders of this generation, one of the best interior presences that the NBA has, even at the the slightly elderly age of 34. But what really impresses me about this team is their effort on the perimeter. I'll start with Steph because he's having probably the best defensive season of his career. He's averaging 1.8 steals per game, but what sticks out more to me is his defended field goal percentage, which as it stands right now, opponents are shooting 36.8% when guarded by Steph Curry. This somehow includes a 44% clip inside of 6 feet, which is 16 points below the average. I don't know how sustainable this is because we're looking at like Brooke Lopez and Rudy Gobert territory in terms of differential. But what's always been true about Steph throughout his career is that when he wants to be engaged defensively or when he needs to be engaged defensively, he can be. Yes, he's undersized. Yes, he's like 6'2", 180 pounds. But very similarly to Kyrie Irving, he's got great hands, great anticipation, and overall, when he needs to put forth that level of effort, he can and he will. He's willing to be disruptive on the perimeter when the time calls for it. And a benefit of having this reduced minutes and a benefit of having this reduced offensive load is that he can generate more effort on defense. But I don't want to understate the acquisitions of DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson, as well as the contributions of Andrew Wiggins, Brandon Pajemski. This is just a fantastic overall defensive unit. They are currently allowing opponents to shoot just 43.9% from the field overall and just 31.9% from three, which are the third and best marks in the league, respectively. The number that sticks out more to me, however, is their dominance on the glass. This team is second in the NBA in total rebounds per game, despite the fact that their tallest rotation player is Trace Jackson Davis at 6'9". You don't have a tremendous amount of size on the perimeter, and you really don't have like a striking level of athleticism either. I mean, Andrew Wiggins is a terrific athlete. DeAnthony Melton is a terrific athlete, but Kyle Anderson is not jumping out of the gym. Brandon Pajemski is not jumping out of the gym. What this is, it's a philosophical manifestation, gang rebounding. Steve Kerr stresses to his team that they have to finish possessions with a rebound. They need to secure the ball at the end of shots. That is the only way to ensure that your defense is actually locked down, is by not giving the other team's second chances. Additionally, the rebounding numbers are quite spread out. Kevon Looney is the team's leading rebounder at 8.5 per game, but he's averaging only 16 minutes. Draymond Green is at 5. Steph Curry is at about 5. I rounded down for those two guys, but you have a bunch of wings who are averaging like 4 or 5 rebounds. That is, of course, as I mentioned, the gang rebounding mentality, but also the result of them forcing their opponents into a ton of missed threes. As we know, long shots create long rebounds, and those are going to go to guys who are on the perimeter. It's also just basic fundamentals. After the shot goes up, turning around, seeing where the ball is, judging the angle of the shots. Also, boxing out is tremendous. I keep harping on this point, but Golden State's defense this year executes at almost the exact same rate as what it was during the dynasty years in 2014, 2015, even through 16, 17, 18. There is a prioritization of being disruptive on defense, not allowing your opponents to get into a rhythm, messing with shooters' rhythm, messing with the timing of sets, getting steals, generating a lot of deflections, and both of those are actually near the top of the league as they were, a couple years ago. Right now, Golden State is third in the NBA in steals per game. They are second in deflections per game at 20.7. If we go back to just last season, they were at 13.6, which was like the 22nd worst mark in the NBA. And there's nothing remarkable about any of this. You don't have to be a freakazoid athlete on the perimeter. You don't have to be Trey Murphy or Herb Jones to get deflections. Like, you can be Steph Curry, you can be Brandon Pajemski. It just requires a little bit of effort. Now, having Draymond Green helps tremendously, as we know. I don't think there's really anything I can say about Green's impact on the Warriors defense, but when you do have a strong interior presence, you feel more comfortable going out and extending your defense to like 25, 27 feet, because you know that if you get beat, there will be a chance for you to get back into the play because you have the appropriate help behind you. Similar things can be said about Andrew Wiggins, who's turned into a remarkable defender in his own right. There is, of course, also the systematic aspect of things when it comes to just being very switchable. When you have a bunch of guys who are very similar in terms of their size and their athleticism and their mobility, you can switch everything. You can get away with mismatches, especially nowadays when the NBA does tend to run a little bit more small. Of course, things will remain to be seen if, they get into a 7-game series against Houston, for example, or Denver, but we're not thinking that far ahead. Regardless, the overall foundation is there. This is the same Warriors defense that has existed throughout Steve Kerr's tenure. One of the reasons why they weren't as successful over the last couple of years was roster construction. You look at just last year's team compared to this one. The bones are still the same. They had Chris Paul. However, Moses Moody was a huge piece of their rotation. Dario Saric. But this year, those guys are gone. You replace them with Melton and Kyle Anderson, who are proven defenders, who are proven elite, maybe not elite, but who have proven themselves to be productive defenders, in addition to the rest of the team having another year of experience under their belt. Now, what's also interesting about this is that Steve Kerr is running a very lengthy rotation. He's currently at 11 guys, averaging more than 15 minutes per game. This I believe to be an active choice because this is an older team, right? Steph Curry is 36. Draymond Green is 34. Kyle Anderson is 31. Gary Payton II is 32. You can't have a long leash with these guys early on in the season. Yes, there's going to be a time when the rotation gets slimmed down. I would imagine, that's after the All-Star break when the seeding races ramp up, but that's natural. That's the natural progression of a coach's rotation. But the thing with the Warriors is their rotation slims down just in number and not necessarily by player because Steve Kerr has the confidence to go with whatever guy is the best matchup. We'll use Kevon Looney as an example because with Steve Kerr, his minutes are very sporadic, or maybe not sporadic, but his appearances are very much driven by matchups, probably more than anybody else. If you need a big physical presence, he's going to play. If you don't, he's not. It's really that simple. If we go back to 2022, we'll use the second round series against Memphis and the conference finals against Dallas. Looney against Memphis averaged 18 and a half minutes per game, which is actually up from the first round series of that year when he was at 13. We go ahead and we look at the conference finals against Dallas. He averaged 28 minutes per game. Yeah, man, I'm ready to admit that I did not see Golden State being this this extraordinary. This really is a shock for me. I fully anticipated to see them like, around the fifth or sixth spot. Maybe a playoff team or a really, really good play-in team. But it just goes to show the power of team building and how drastically a team can turn around when they get the right pieces in there. Even when you have a generational talent like Steph Curry. I mean, the reason the Warriors were able to stay above 500 is largely because of Steph. But even Steph, even LeBron, you need the appropriate pieces around them. And it's even harder for them to succeed. It was even harder for them to succeed because the Western Conference just kept getting better and better and better. Now the West to me is all over the place, right? Dallas is worse than I expected. Denver's a little bit better than I expected them to be, largely because Nikola Jokic is having one of the most statistically impressive seasons of all time. Minnesota being only one game above 500 is also a little bit of a shock, but you got to remember, like, a bunch of these teams underwent sizable moves in the offseason. The Warriors did as well, but those moves were additions, obviously, and they were additions that fit this team perfectly. So Mike Dunleavy did an incredible job this offseason, and it just goes to show that the that the dynasty does not die until the player either leaves the team or retires. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. Thank you guys so very much for coming to hang out with me today. As always, everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Drop a comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. If you do any of those three things, you will become my new favorite person. And with that, I will see y'all in the next one.